We'll move on to the second session, titled GSCL 2030 through Digital Transformation. This session will be moderated by Professor Junsuk Kang, Director of BK21 HRD Program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University. We have 5 panelists lined up in this panel discussion. Tony Cho is the CEO and founder of Future of Cities, and Mr. Frank Friesacher is Vice President of IoT and Smart City Strategy and Innovation at Blockchains. And Dr. Hyeok Jeong is a professor in Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul National University. And Dr. Junsuk Kang is a professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Rural System Engineering at Seoul National University. Lastly, Dr. Yonghwan Kim is the CEO of Smart Radar System. For this session, thank you. Mr. Tony Cho and Mr. Frank Friesacher and Professor Hyeok Jeong participate in this session virtually. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Junsuk Kang and all of the panelists. Professor Junsuk Kang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Jeong. And first of all, I'd like to thank all the panelists. It will be a similar format of previous session, but the reason we say panel discussion was actually we shared the common questions, but we have another objective. Additionally, we try to build some common concept, around the question instead of individual perspective. So, hope we refer each other also of previous commentator, and then probably whether your idea can be complement or be to build add up common comments. I shared actually 4 key leadership questions for the panelists, and out of that, actually, I decided to do first 3, and the last one, quite relevant and also redundant with the previous about the Korea-United States partnership or possible activities. My first question, which I shared, were how the global smart cities may require the global smart city citizenship. And then if such citizenship exists, or we already have or we may have, what would be your description and understanding about global citizenship? Definitely, I think we are in the very new probably stage and in let's say smart city renaissance. But finally, this city will have full of residents or citizens who will live in smart cities, and hope we should have certain expectation about it. I'd like to ask Tony Cho, who is actually founder of Future of Cities. I believe you have, Tony, you have a very forward-looking also expectation about how our society should be and how also to be, smart citizen in the future. And what is your understanding about the smart citizens?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. I wanted to also recognize my colleague, Michael Woods from Sun Holdings, and all the rest of my esteemed panelists. I am actually adopted by a South Korean martial arts master, and feel very proud to be participating in this panel with you all. My passion is around really kind of the intersection of community, technology, and innovation, and really how do we co-create and co-design cities of the future that are equitable, that are regenerative, and that are sustainable. And so a lot of our focus today has been on the technology stack, on the tech side, but a lot of what we're focused on is kind of the approach to co-designing these cities, leveraging the technologies, but in support of human needs and really improving the quality of life and increasing equity within those cities. So I think a key component of really achieving regenerative, equitable, smart cities, the ones that we all envision collectively, is really gaining consensus. But I also think it's about open sourcing best practices and demonstration projects from all over the world and really stop working in silos and funnels. You know, the public and private sector and foundations and all aspects of society and all industries need to collaborate. I use the analogy about the pandemic and how, you know, the entire scientific, pharmaceutical, and public sector came together to really search for a cure for the pandemic and for COVID-19. And although we're still struggling, you know, with the variants and the mutations of the virus, you know, the fact remains is that incredible innovations were achieved because there was incredible coordination and there was incredible collaboration between and among many different countries, many different industries, and many different public and private sectors working together. The same is now required is that education of that citizen, is really providing the data. But you have 1.7 billion people in the world who are unconnected, who don't have access to clean water and healthy food and a roof over their head. That's a big problem, but that's a huge opportunity in my mind. And so you won't achieve equity and you won't be able to create smart cities until you provide connectivity to everybody. And you really focus kind of on the human components. But a lot of it starts with inclusion and being fully participatory in the process to address creating these smart cities. And have you seen with Google Sidewalk Labs in Toronto, you know, the community just basically rejected the project. And so there's, in the United States and in Canada, North America in particular, there's a huge mistrust in government and the public sector. And we have to build that trust and we have to decentralize information. And I think blockchain is going to play a key role to democratizing access to real estate. And so I think leveraging those types of technology is really going to accelerate this transition to a more equitable smart city, and leveraging the technologies that are existent and building consensus and stop working kind of in competition. These are solutions that are needed all over the world in every country. And I think it's really critical for the United States and South Korea to work together. You know, our Asian, you know, democratic counterpart that is in many ways, as many other panelists said, is much more advanced than us, technologically speaking, with basically bringing the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, to a place where we can achieve the goals that we have for a smart city.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'd like to actually ask Professor Kang Junsuk, you know, how would you respond as a you know, green technology also experts, and also, you know, relying on also probably considering infrastructure aspects of the green building and green infrastructure. How would you respond to Tony's actually understanding on smart citizenship?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I thought about. I thank you, Tony. I thought about that question also as well. So, I think some definition or description for understanding about global citizenship. Let me answer or try to answer that question. Think about two things. First one is what is the smart citizenship, and then how to achieve smart citizenship. And second thing, including global, how to achieve global citizenship. So first thing, leaders need to provide answer that first question. So I think smart citizenship is not free, as you know. For example, one of the biggest smart city project is the National Strategic Smart City Project. And yesterday, result announced, and also Director Hwang also involved in Living Lab in Seoul. So best way of the citizen involved in smart project is in Korea, Daegu in use case, and then Seoul is the Living Lab. So that is the best way the citizen to be involved in the government policy and vision, and then gradually there would be a smart citizen. And the second thing is top global. It's possible global smart citizenship. So, as you pointed out, Professor in the morning, afternoon, Martin. So, smart or smartness is very unique. No, I mean case by case. I mean, it's a non-monolithic, maybe same meaning. So that global, so leader have to provide also good consensus-based decision-making process for the all over the world. So that also we are responsible for that. So let me wrap up at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you relate that, also smart citizenship in such probably lead us to the need of also leadership on the global practice, and well, which include a lot of our humanity actually face. And recently, actually, Tony and I have been actually discussing about the recent disaster coming, natural, like a natural disaster actually changes over the, our globe, and which, probably changed how traditional cities has been affected, and finally, and also how that actually give a problem to the existing cities, and instead of rebuilding in the cities. Well, as a global expert of international development, I'd like to ask Professor Hyeok from the Graduate School of International Studies of SNU to respond, your wisdom on the citizenship and global smart citizenship.
Okay, thank you. I'm a basically development economist with some macroeconomic and international perspective, and for the global prosperity. And I'd like to pitch some of my opinions about the smart city, global smart city citizenship. I guess before we talk about the smart city citizenship or some priorities for the smart city development, we need to clarify what would be the goals of those citizenship. As Tony just suggested, the role of community would be important. And in the first session, actually, there were lots of related discussions came up, like customer-centered. But to lay out some basic goals to discuss about those concepts, I think first thing we need to think about is what kinds of global perspective. Are we talking about like reaching out the global markets? Or are we talking about like providing some global public goods? So in what dimension the smart city can be helpful in achieving either of these? Or we also need to recognize the approach, whether it would be the tech-based or the people-based. And then, in fact, there can be some tensions or synergy depending on what kinds of implementation method we're using. So I think we need to discuss these fundamental issues first. And my personal position is smart city would be successful in spreading to the globe when we take like a second approach rather than the first approach. Also, I think to share rather than just the business sales or the profits, sharing the idea is the key rather than just forming the simple network of businesses. So for that part, I'm not saying that the business model is not important. It's actually the core, because only with the sustainable business models we can continue to interact around the globe. However, whether those dimensions and scope of cooperation are kind of organized around these like cooperation around the sales of profits or around the idea sharing, we may have a little different approaches to promote this concept of smart city to the globe. So for the remaining discussions, perhaps I can elaborate on this. But that's the first thing I would like to shed on this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jeong. Well, I think the previous three panelists actually gave a kind of certain common sense of smartness actually has also very unique and cultural and local capability, but at the same time also global humanity and also improved human nature. At the same time, also social content out of it, and also not just only technology innovation. I'd like to actually relate this one into the citizenship need and also concept of smartness and global on the citizenship side. How would we actually have a certain citizenship to be either promoted and also matured and also diffused more within our society by good leadership? I believe actually the reason that we have this first global smart city leadership in this forum is smart city actually development needs a good leader. And also smart city citizenship need a good leader that would actually relate and listen to the good smart citizenship. I'd like to ask Dr. Yonghwan Kim, who is the CEO and the founder of a global, founder of the Smart Radar System, who have a very unique technology, who can hear actually a lot of things, including the human voice, human mobility, and through the radar system. Dr. Kim, would you please give your wisdom for us for leadership?
Thank you. It's so good to see all the friends, especially Frank. Are you calling from Canada right now? Must be. I think we do have a very unique perspective when you approach a smart city. In order to connect the technology from South Korea to United States, we need someone who understands both cultures as well as technology. Before I founded this smart radar system as a kind of a building cornerstone for the smart city, I used to read smart city business inside a big company, and then went to Dubai and then come up with a vision, trying to do everything at once. But now I'm having a different approach, working with a company called the BG Lion Star, which was introduced by Norman Anderson. Together, we are working on renovating a small area in St. Louis, which we call micro smart city. In that case, initially, we proposed to use image radar to help the veterans who's going to live in that area. But later on, we need to kind of come up with a bigger scope of the smart city technology to help the entire community. So the problem is how we're going to kind of connect the technology from Korea to United States. In order to do that, we definitely need a kind of a platform which can kind of shop all the technologies and then being able to install or make an action inside the United States. So for my case, the kind of leadership we need to for the smart city is not just a vision. We need someone who actually be able to go out and then execute the plan. So, and then in order to do that, it doesn't have to be a bigger scope of a smart city. It could be a very small community enhancement, or could be a micro level kind of a smart city. So now it's a time. That's why we are expanding our organization into Silicon Valley to carry out this kind of business. And then in that case, we definitely will work with many technology provider to help innovate the community. So this is kind of a new kind of a leadership we need.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Actually, you're very active and agile and adaptive leadership into the very dynamic international environment, and also congratulations for your also new market creation and also business in the United States. I'd like to go back to Tony back again. I believe actually through the smart city, everyone, both leaders and also many people and developer are expecting or experiencing new community, or we are probably creating maybe new community we want to have, that all want to keep or grow the community we have now. And in such kind of assumption or interaction we are going now, how would you say, what kind of leadership do we need for such global citizens, cities and citizenship? Tony?
What was the last word? What kind of what do we need for global citizens?
I mean the leadership.
What kind of
leadership. Leadership.
We need leadership that's visionary, but that's also pragmatic. Because I think, again, going back to where we were before, it's about education. Many people don't even understand what smart cities are. And what we talked about before, for me, I think is really to work in the context of wise cities, taking ancient traditions and ancient technologies, indigenous technologies, and combining them, respecting the cultures. Every place has a story of place. Every place has a unique culture, has a unique geography, has a unique history. And I think that we can layer smart city solutions and technology stacks over and integrate them with the existing culture, provided that it's not really disrupting those cultures. And so I think leadership needs to have diverse perspectives. So each place needs to have local representation, local leadership that understands the specific cultural idiosyncrasies and specialities that each place has. And that's really how we start really defining the story of place, which can define those leaders and build trust. And so essentially what it is it's like we were saying before, it's really important that you don't need to build a massive smart city to do a demonstration project. Every project can be a living laboratory. And instead of telling people what a smart city is, you have to show them what a smart city is and what it means. It's different in Seoul than it may be in Detroit, and it may be in London or Paris or Milan or other places all over the world. Every community, every neighborhood, every city should have the opportunity to co-design their best outcomes, leveraging the best practices of smart cities, leveraging the technologies, leveraging the solutions. So I think there's global leadership that needs to collaborate with local leadership at all levels of society. And it's very critical to have a diverse perspective of people, male, female, every background, every socioeconomic representation involved in the process. That's the only way that you're going to have the best outcomes, and you're going to have the best harmony, and not have this distrust of data collection, data privacy, distrust of government, lack of consensus, and all of these things. So leadership really needs to build consensus and build trust. And it can't necessarily be from the top down, it has to be from the bottom up. So we need to identify leaders within the local communities that can be educated in equitable, smart cities, wise cities, regenerative cities that are really going to be something that are going to be addressing the major problems. And I think the way that we can align as a global community, as global smart city citizens, is around the biggest challenges that we face. One of the biggest challenges we face, as everyone knows today, is the climate crisis. The built environment, the construction industry, the development industry, infrastructure accounts for roughly 50% of CO2 emissions in the world. So unless we disrupt that industry by leveraging these types of technologies, 3D printing, hempcrete, carbon capturing concrete, the built environment and the building industry has not innovated in over 100 years. We're still building the same way, and particularly in North America. In Asia, and what Michael was saying, in China, from 3D printing and that standpoint, Asia is much more advanced than the United States. But it's not about one country being advanced. This needs to be a global transformation. So we need to open source and share these best practices, because it's a matter of survival of our civilization. more than anything. And I don't think people realize that. We're kind of getting past this post-competitive, post-capitalistic model into something that has to be more regenerative and that accounts for the externalities of unbridled capitalism that's just focusing on profit. So as someone who's a futurist and a technologist and also a community activist, how do we marry those two? And I think that the answer to the question is diversity of representation in leadership, really seeking out diversity. And I think that's one way we're going to be able to build consensus and build trust among a broad audience of people.
Thank you very much, Tony. Very inspiring also a message from you. Well, relaying in your kind of leadership necessity, for the smart city, with the vision and also pragmatism, especially in the very diverse environment and with local value and also global value. I'd like to invite Frank, who's actually working in both New York and also Nevada, but also, also inventing a new city, all right, out of desert, which need a lot of ambition with your company in blockchains. And two, give what kind of leadership you might need in such kind of environment, from your also experience, what you are doing in your project. At the same time, I'd like to, after that, invite Professor Hyeok, who have been actually involved in many international and also developing and developed work in our project, how such kind of leadership can be promoted in both countries. If we don't have, or current leadership is still lacking in such, for the upcoming smart city, and then what we should do. So I'd like to ask Frank to give your thinking first, and then Professor Hyeok.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me here at this great event. I want to build on some of the things that Tony said. I agree about diversity, understanding the communities and the sort of global impacts of smart cities. When you're digital really doesn't have boundaries. It can be very hyper-localized, or it can be interacting with other smart cities around the world. So having some leadership that understands sort of the hyper-local issues, that can use the new tools that we have with sensors and big data and AI to address very, very local community, neighborhood issues, but at the same time, create bridges to other smart cities and create bridges to other countries around the world and create that global citizenship that we talked about earlier. Someone that can navigate that. But it's also diversity in functional capabilities. And what I mean by that is, we're facing this right now. We're building a city based on a smart city based on blockchain. We feel that blockchain brings an element of trust. We've heard trust a number of times tonight, and until the issue of trust can really be addressed, it's hard to move into the new frontiers that are possible. And we feel like blockchain can bring that fabric of trust to overlay all the current IoT and big data systems to really open up sort of new venues. And I think the leadership needs to know how to use these tools. We have a lot of new tools at our disposal, big data, marketplaces for apps that make use of the data, cultural, or I should say citizen engagement with government services delivered at a hyper-local level or at a macro level across the smart city or between cities. Having leaders that understand the various tools at their disposal and can marry them with policy and governance that almost automate the governments at a decentralized level throughout a city. Things like that, having that sort of leadership, I think can really drive this new frontier forward.
Thank you. Professor Jeong, you may add.
I guess the crucial points are already made, but I'd like to add one more thing about leadership in making this smart city as a global. Well, recognizing the local needs and the diversity is key, but at the same time, at the global level, I think establishing some architecture of the idea searching and sharing is also important, because we may figure out what kinds of diversities are there in the local areas, in either advanced economies or developing countries. But simple meeting of the local needs maybe may not extend the true potential of the smart city, because as Frank just pointed out, the smart city tech can be really applied at the global level, and solving some global problems like climate changes, not just the community problems. To make that happen, perhaps extending the scope of cooperation in two dimensions may be very helpful. One, in interdisciplinary collaboration between development perspective and the engineering or the technology perspective. Because from the development perspective, you can better identify what are the true needs, and this engineering and science perspective would provide what can be the solutions that fits the needs. So this kind of direct dialogues and communication between the two disciplines seems to be very important. And also, in the second dimension would be the cross-country collaboration. For example, like a US-Korea collaboration may be very important, in particular widening the scope of idea searching. Ideas are really spread. It's not concentrated in either advanced economies or developing economies. So to do that, maybe mobilizing there are startups everywhere who propose new technologies and new ideas, but consolidating the relevant ideas to develop into the useful knowledge and technology, there may be we may need some kinds of platform. And indeed, from the experience and the technology of the smart city, not just for smart city technology, but technology in general, there is a big room for collaboration between the US and Korea. It's not because the areas of the comparative advantages differ, rather than that, but because by making or widening the scope of collaboration cross-country would just increasing the pool of idea search. And in fact, the US-Korea collaboration may extend the pool itself at the global level. So for those two dimensions, I think there should be an explicit role, even at the global level, in harmonizing with this, meeting the local needs and diversity.
Thank you, both Tony and Professor Jeong. And naturally, I think your comments actually give me the chance to move on to our last final and also monumental discussion. I'd like everyone actually comment if you can. So our final discussion actually point is what would be the three priority fields, if you can, that Global Smart City Leaders Forum work together as a strategic community of practice, especially for next year. I think this forum will be held in this, expo, possibly and every year, and hope, we have a very strategic cooperation through and being a platform for that. So, I'd like to ask Professor Dr. Yonghwan Kim and also Professor Yonghwan Kim, who is actually also a professor at SNU, is teaching in Smart City Global Convergence Program. So, Professor Kim, would you please, give us some directions that, three fields we may focus on?
Basically, it's not just the three fields. We have so many fields, but I like to focus on the three fields. The first one is definitely mobility, but that's not going to be a problem we can solve in such a short time frame. But we want to live in a society where we cut down the commuting hours and then being able to get the time back for our own life. So mobility will be the crucial kind of agenda. But another agenda will be healthcare, because we are living in a very aged society, and then we need to support the kind of like underserved communities as well. For that, we're going to work with the blockchain to enable image radar system for healthcare systems in the United States. But when it comes to technology, it's quite amazing. Even though the technology is originated from Korea, it could be directly applied to the United States as well. You know, for my case, I live in both San Francisco and then Seoul. Every time I go to San Francisco, I feel like I'm in Seoul again, because I go to Jeong restaurant and then other Korean restaurants, and then sometimes I get confused. Likewise, the technology does not have any nationality attached, so it could be applied to many cases. Now we are seeing a huge demand in the healthcare side. The last one is security. I like the technology made by the company called Ring. I believe they were acquired by Google. And then in the States, where you buy a camera system from the Ring, then it's just a simple sensor, but they do have a data kind of a notion. So it is connected throughout the community. So once everything weird thing happens, for example, someone comes to your house and then take your Amazon parcels away, then they're going to send the alarm message to entire community. That way, all of a sudden, sensor will have a life because it has a connectivity and then associated the data. So this kind of security will be the key kind of component for the smart city.
Thank you very much. Definitely, the security infrastructure should be there. We will be dealing with a lot of data, and then in smart way. Thank you, Professor Kim and Professor Kang. You and I have the same first name, Junsuk, but we are working on different fields. You are in the more green innovation infrastructure. I'm more on the smart infrastructure. But in smart city aspects, we both agree that these green values and smart values are not separable. And also there are a lot of environmental, and also not only the environmental, energy related issues and future infrastructure issues. So Professor Kang, then how did you probably summarize your idea into three fields we may focus on as a leader?
Yes. Yeah, I think let me tell you three things, so time is running out. So first thing, I think a leaders forum clearly need to provide well-organized educational platform. So continuously we need to provide the education information to the global smart citizen or global potential smart citizen. How to do that? I think digital transformation might have a significant role in this area. So technology every day emerging, so to catch up to that speed, I think digital transformation important, and also another Junsuk also emphasizing that on. And second thing, leaders forum have to provide direction or way. So I think there is no standard. What is the smart city or not? So we need to set up the smart city rating system. For example, Seoul or smart city level platinum, or Singapore, platinum double or platinum A, something like that. Anyway, we need to provide a rating system. And third thing, leaders have to keep in mind always balanced. So even if technology important, however, humanity and sustainability is still important. So a smart city can be sustainable through overcoming the climate crisis. So maybe future smart city also seems like a carbon neutral or climate crisis free city. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kang. That definitely that smart city, probably probably expect leaders with very inclusive values, for the society. Frank, I'd like to invite you also, your expectation about the leadership, and also the three fields of, along with the field that may we, as a community, strategic community of practice together, and then where we can focus on for following years.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to pick up on something Dr. Weiss said at the beginning, and he was illustrating how TCP/IP came into being and how important it was as sort of a common networking protocol that had guaranteed delivery of data, et cetera. And I feel like we're at a new point with smart cities in terms of the infrastructure. We've done a great job of digitizing cities. We're doing a great job of collecting the massive amounts of data and applying AI, et cetera. But I think the new challenge is really looking at how do we collaborate on standards and technologies for creating a trusted digital infrastructure, one that as we proliferate these systems of systems, it's getting more complex. There are also different manufacturers, many different protocols, and many different use cases. Some use cases are not so serious, maybe like digital parking or lighting, and some are very serious. They may be emergency response, medical, et cetera, almost having tiered levels of service and things like that. I think there's a lot of work we can do in defining a new digital infrastructure that brings in a layer of trust and accountability, and most of all, security. We can't afford to have hacks to our critical infrastructure. People need to have trust in the system. All these things, I think, distill down to looking at digital infrastructure, and almost like when HTTP, if you remember this, became HTTPS, with the S for secure connection, people suddenly started using the internet for e-commerce, and we got into a whole new world. I think smart cities need that next level of trusted digital infrastructure. So I think that's one big area. I know the others have mentioned this, but I totally agree. I think mobility, having smart mobility can address so many issues, quality of life, regaining our real estate in the cities. If you look today, how much real estate is used up by roadways and parking and gas stations and all the rest. It's a lot of space that could really be reclaimed for people again, and at the same time reduce pollution and accidents and other things. So if we can address mobility with new micro mobility, sharing of scooters, which is a very popular thing right now, autonomous vehicles, electrification, they solve a lot of problems all at once. And it needs to be designed in from the beginning. And lastly, and relatedly, is what everyone else has also mentioned, is this environmental sustainability and in our response to climate change. We have a lot of tools now with sensors. Our company in particular is doing a lot of work in the energy sector to bring blockchain into tracking the sources of renewable energy, providing credits for renewable energies like solar and wind, and then also acknowledging geothermal, other types of energy. And right from production through consumption, as we charge our electric vehicles or we heat or air condition our homes, having that complete view and allowing us to balance the needs across the city and across our lives. That's all possible now, and we can make a big dent in how climate change is affecting things. So I think those three areas would be what I'd be looking at.
Yep. Thank you, Frank. The security and mobility and environmental sustainability as a key field. Thank you, appreciate that. As a last two commentators, one from Korea, one from the United States, Professor Jeong, we already mentioned some of the action field, but as a last comment and others, would you maybe add or summarize or integrate some of the things that we mentioned from Korean or international aspects, that's three fields. And I'd like to invite also same way from Tony. So Jeong first.
Okay, thank you. From some little kind of fundamental picture, I'd like to propose for this leadership forum to create an architecture of finance and idea matching. because we have talked about what kinds of smart city technologies can be applied, but those technologies are perhaps already available, but we are also interested in creating new technologies and new ideas, but which needs funding. So, and which also requires the financial scheme. So that can be one thing, this architecture of a global architecture of matching between ideas and finance. That's one. Then second comment that I would like to add is related to some international development perspective, which is in terms of areas applying this smart technology. From the developing countries' perspective, three areas are quite pending and urgent. One is health. We perhaps do not want to monitor the people's mobility, but the mobility of the virus. So for that one, this public health application is very crucial. And also this housing itself is really lagging behind in those regions. So, and the final thing is climate change. We'd like to, I hope this forum would like to identify its true impacts on these climate changes by designing a better city. So for those three areas, maybe I hope this forum would make as a focal point, not entire list, but at least the inclusion of these three issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jeong. And Tony, the last but not the least. You are muted, Tony, probably. Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. So many good ideas have already been put forward, so I definitely have a challenge to kind of add some additional stuff. But I think one area that we haven't discussed properly that I may offer as an area that I think should be standardized and should be promoted is the public policy component. Because if you don't have the urban planners, the city planners, the policy makers from a regional, statewide, federal, national, international level, you're not going to be able to implement these technologies, these innovative ideas, these land planning solutions, de-emphasizing the automobile, doing away with parking, all these progressive ideas that we, I think, here in this group, in this collective, agree upon. But we need to educate our public policy makers and our elected politicians and elected representatives to understand the benefits of smart cities and how it's going to help enhance the lives of human beings and other species as well, all living beings within the planet. If we have cleaner air, cleaner water, we have smarter cities, wiser cities, it should be for the benefit of everybody at all levels of society. And this should be able to spread. So I think the standardization of these solutions and the cross-sector collaboration and the interoperability and the flexibility, as was discussed earlier, I think are really kind of something that I would put forth for this forum to study, is really what kind of best practices and standards. We have a framework of new sustainable development framework that we're working on in Future of Cities that's called regenerative placemaking. And it's essentially taking the principles of regenerative development, which is equitable, inclusive, participatory development process that takes into consideration all human and non-human considerations, the story of place, sustainability, equity, inclusion, all these components, smart city applications together, and to create living laboratories. And that's really kind of a framework. So like that, I think there needs to be a framework and a metrics leveraging that data of those smart cities to really provide us the information so that we can achieve net zero, so that we can achieve climate positive. So I think I'm very much in alignment on that, on the public policy and the advocacy side. One thing that we haven't really addressed also is the food crisis. We're in a situation where a lot of people are leaving cities, particularly because of the pandemic, and they're spreading out and we're going back into this suburban and urban sprawl, and there's this anti-development sentiment. And so that comes in with crafting smart city policies and regenerative ideas around development, because all development is not bad. We want to do intelligent and inclusive development that is really going to be solving for the 99%. Which brings me to another point that was mentioned before, is affordable, attainable housing. We're not providing enough of the right housing, not only in emerging markets and third world countries, but in first world countries. We don't have appropriate stock of housing that's affordable. Energy is not equitably dispersed among people of different races and different socioeconomic backgrounds. They bear the brunt of the higher cost of electricity, and pass-throughs for their home. So I think all of those things can be democratized, and there are systems and best practices that we can roll up into an international standards body around smart cities that can be shared. And we can start that dialogue and that discourse between the United States and South Korea and create a model which then can be replicated and adapted across the world. So sustainability, global standards, security, obviously very important to build trust, the affordability and the attainable housing, addressing also seniors and elderly with healthcare. And then to make it all happen, you need the political will and the leadership, the public policy, the advocacy to really make it happen. So
Thank you.
Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Very integrated, also comprehensive, and as a discussion to embrace all of our discussion. Well, I'd like to add three also point of mine, to integrate, summarize, or conclude our panel discussion. Well, thank you, Tony, and Professor Hyeok, and Frank, and Professor Kang, and Professor Yonghwan for being in this discussion panel. From your precious idea, what I found that smart citizens probably expecting the leaders with very collective and democratic leadership, which require a lot of partnership and also embracive thinking. At the same time, those relationships will be exercised as a team. So economists will be working on the funding and financing good funding model, right? And also the engineers will be working on the security with the finance of the either Bitcoin or blockchain, where you can actually motivate the economy to revamp our innovation in this field. At the same time, the policymaker will still need to do very strong leadership to have a diverse the customer or the citizens to be involved in the smart citizenship. So I think that the forum we are creating, that is probably, I think, even though it is, in some country very early stage, but still we are expecting very collective and democratic leadership in a way that, the citizens' idea can be practiced through the data and other things. That secondly, that all the field that you mentioned are in common as a human race, everyone facing, which is also summarized in UN SDG. Sustainable housing, right? And, and also the health issues and security issues and data and education issues, all the problems which are already defined. That's why in our forum, we say, Smart City 2030 achievement. So we really want our forum to, work on next 10 years to be one of the forum, a community which are probably dealing with all the UN SDG values through our Renaissance, movement and also devotion to build a smart city better. Finally, giving us a new solution. So we are all in common to, have these either UN or our, global citizen or nations are facing together. And finally, I'd like to emphasize again, the leadership, both leadership and the citizenship are expecting new trust, and also those trust and ownership or identity will be built by education and learning. I don't mean the education and learning by only the traditional degree, but there should be a certain environment, or like this forum or community or living lab, where everyone can have access to have this new environment. Well, on the way of coming to this forum with Professor Ju Young-sub, distinguished professor of Smart City at SNU, we had the lunch and we have a discussion, and that why don't we have this expo over the weekend, where we can have citizens and families coming together and listen to what's going on. Is our still expo or forum on only professional degree, or can it be available for the citizens? Can it be available for the universal? I think this is the time that our citizens are smart enough to get involved in any of our discussion. This is not the only area of the professionalism. This is the area of general value, but because the leadership can be strengthened and our citizens can be strengthened, this kind of area. Simply moving over, having these one available, not only online but also having these real-time events over the weekend, and family and the citizen, normal people would be able to. I think probably what I propose to the expo and our forum, we hope these things to be available for all the general community of the cities, so that our professionalism can be practiced. Before Frank mentioned pragmatic, and also Tony mentioned the pragmatic, so that we can improve all the citizens and citizenship. Well, I think we are already past the time around. First of all, I really thank Frank and Tony, you joining here in very early morning of the United States, and overnight discussion. I greatly appreciate that. Hope we can meet in person in next year and being together, and hope also you feel the great sense of the leadership and also together with us and showing us, and at the same time also with the Korean smart citizenship. Thank you, and greatly appreciate everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you.